Now on afternoons, Sydney Siders with Jim Haynes.
2:30. The Sydney Sider today needs no introduction, but it is the great Col Joye.
Yes, Colin Frederick Jacobsen, AM. It's a very sad day. You will recall about 18 months ago we lost Frank Ifield.
Yes.
And
you knew him well.
I knew Frank and Colin. Colin had many... Everyone in showbiz was Colin's friend because he was such a jovial, happy... He lit up the room. And I think I said to you when we lost Frank, being backstage with Frank and Colin, either or, you just didn't want to leave. I'd have to go on and do my thing, and they'd say, Jim, it's time. I don't want to go. I'm having more fun back here talking to Col. And he told great stories. And he also used to come on when I was on air with George and Paul, yes. And he would come on. I've got some stories, but let's get through the bio first. It is a very
amazing life.
It was a great life. Now, in the 1930s, George Jacobsen and his wife Min moved to East Hills, and that's where they had their kids and raised their kids. And now East Hills then was like the end of the world, and I remember Colin telling me that they had earthen floors. And his mum actually cooked outside when they first moved to East Hills. She cooked outside, she washed outside, and all that sort of thing. And it was obviously a very, very happy childhood. He said one thing was that their home was the social centre on Saturday nights for the whole district. And it wasn't a big district, there were just some new settlers basically out there. They'd all come to the home, and they had a pianola. And he said most Saturday nights we'd all be around the pianola, earthenware floor, and we'd have a great time. And he said and I said, why not every Saturday? He said, and you couldn't always take Colin seriously, but he said, well, Jim, sometimes the pianola got repossessed, and then we'd go and get it back again. So, what a wonderful childhood. Of course, he had two brothers, Kevin, who was the older, Kevin Jacobsen, yep. And we'll chat about what they did together, and Keith, and they were all in the band. There was also Carol, who had a big part in Col's career as well, as she sort of ran the show and did all the bookings and that sort of stuff. And he went to East Hills Primary, I think, and East Hills High School, if there was one at the time, and he left school, became a jewellery salesman.
Wow.
He would have been so good at that. He was so charming and good looking. I reckon he could sell women jewellery until the cows came home. But then, look, Kevin formed a jazz group, and it was called the KJ Quintet, the Kevin Jacobsen Quintet. And he was on rhythm guitar. And just at this time, when the jazz quintet was, doing gigging around Sydney, rock and roll came in. And so then Colin, who was 2 years younger, I think, than Kevin, he joined as the vocalist, and Keith was on bass, and Kevin was, rhythm, was guitar and so on. And they organised their own gigs, and because it was so primitive in those days, the world of music and bands and rock and roll was just beginning, or jazz even, being played, that they built Keith built electric guitars and amplifiers because you couldn't buy any in Australia. Okay. So they built them, yeah. And they started listening to the music coming from the USA. And what you would do, because there were rules about having Australian content, so you would get the single sent over and then do your version of it. So that's why there were so many Aussie versions of American things at the time. And the first hit that the Joy Boys, I'll come to their name in a minute, the first hit that Joy Boys was Stagger Lee. Now, that's a sort of rhythm and bluesy thing, Lloyd Price. Mm-hmm. And so they did a cover of that, and that charted quite well. And then Bye Bye Baby in 1959, and that number one.
Yes.
And then I brought my copy in to show you. I actually got to let you know that I aided this becoming a record-breaking single, rather. It's got Living Doll on one side and Oh Yeah, Aha, which was the first pop record produced in Australia to go nationally number one. someone had beaten them to it, but not considered a pop record. There was Slim Dusty.
Oh, Pub with
No Beer.
Let's have a quick listen to this one.
If you wanna be happy, come along with me. Oh yeah. I wanna hold you close beneath the bamboo tree. Oh yeah. We'll take a
Catchy.
Oh,
Still catchy.
Wonderful. The
Yeah.
voice still, I haven't quite come to terms with the fact that he's not around.
No.
So, okay, then it all took off. They toured on Lee Gordon's Rock and Roll Spectacular in '59, Channel 9 Bandstand, and of course 6 O'Clock Rock with Johnny O'Keefe. And they also had hits individually. After the glory days of the Joy Boys, I suppose, Colin went off and did some things on his own. And the Joy Boys also had instrumental hits, Southern Roarer, and, so on. So they did their own thing as well. Now, Colin was so popular after he started appearing on Bandstand because Johnny O'Keefe was the rebel and Col Joye was the Mr. Nice Guy, and he played the role to the hilt, let me tell you. And the boy next door, Mr. Nice Guy. There were two permanent members in those Bandstand days, two people answering his fan mail.
Really?
Yes.
Opening the letters.
It took two people to do it.
Oh,
so that's how huge he was. Now, he married Dallas Dawson in 1970, two kids, Clayton and Amber. They're both famous in their own right in different areas. Amber lives in New York still, I think, and Clayton's been involved in production and so on of lots of major series in Australia. But I remember mostly about Colin is that he also, and a lot of people don't realise this, he also was a country music singer and he won a golden guitar. He won a golden guitar for Heaven Is My Woman's Love.
Great song.
Which was number one right across Australia, and won a golden guitar in '74. Now, that was only the second golden guitars, and they only were giving away about 3 in those days. So he won that golden guitar. He used to go up to the festival and pack out the Tamworth Town Hall. But he also went into presentation management and publishing with his brother Kevin, and that was Jacobsen Enterprises. And on the other page, I've just given you a list of some of the acts they represented, and it's an amazing list. Barbara Streisand, Bruce Springsteen, the Bee Gees, Kiss, Simon and Garfunkel, Bob Marley, Shania Twain, Billy Joel, John Denver, Pearl Jam, Cyndi Lauper, and Barry Manilow. And more.
In other words, all the names.
All of them.
All of them.
That's right. And big shows too. That they and now we all remember, or most people of my generation remember what happened. Colin was always the nicest bloke. He'd do anything for charity, and his neighbour's tree needed pruning. So Colin, who could be reckless at times, got up there with a chainsaw and started pruning the tree, and he fell out. And that was in 1990. Now, he slipped and fell 6 metres onto brick paving, striking his head, and he was in a coma. And people said, that he'd never recover, which he did. Serious lower back problems, shoulder injuries, and this added a little to the medical problems that he had just prior to his passing for the last 2 or 3 years. Anyway, he recovered and went touring again with Judy Stone, and of course he was in Vietnam entertaining the troops when the Battle of Long Tan began, and Patricia Little Patty was with him, and they had to be rescued by helicopter. The Battle of Long Tan was taking place around them while they were performing. He was in the ARIA Hall of Fame, 1988. He just said, I've got a note here, said his infectious good humour brightened up a stage or a backstage. You lit up the room like Colin. He was just so optimistic, positive, funny, and just loved everybody.
Such a full life, wasn't it?
It was an amazing life. Now, a couple of my memories, I remember him telling me, and this story's been told, the typewriter on Oh Yeah, Aha, which goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, like that. They were recording in 301, the famous studio in Castlereagh Street, and they needed that sound. They were actually copying it from a Buddy Holly song. So the offices were all closed. They were recording on a weekend, so they climbed over the partition and stole a typewriter from one of the desks, and then went back into the recording studio and going hitting the keys. But then, of course, it went ding when it got to the end. And they didn't want that, so they jammed it against a wall so the ding wouldn't happen. But, of course, what that meant was they kept doing this, because you've got to record things a few times over and over and over, and they dug a great hole in the rubber roller. You know, and I said, well, what did you do then? He said, we didn't know what to do, so we just climbed over the partition and put it back on the desk. So,
of course, that's what you do.
That was what you did. Other memories, he was a ukulele freak. He used to come to Debonair's, which is a thing we do once a month, a luncheon, and he would only ever want to play the ukulele. I remember another time I wanted to get him on when I was doing the George and Paul show, and he said, oh, no, I can't come. This was how big Jacobsen Enterprises was. He said to me, oh, I'd love to, Jim, but I've got to go to Germany and sack a trumpet player. So now that that was such a Colin thing to say, and I need to tell you about the Christmas album, which I still feel guilty about. He put out a Christmas album, I don't know, about 2008 or something around that time, and a publicist rang me. It wasn't his publicist, a publicist who was publicising the album, and it was Rock and Roll Christmas or something. So she said, please, can you do something? And I said, yeah, sure. Colin, always happy to come in. So I rang him and he said, yeah, I'll come in, I'll bring the ukulele. So he comes in, and we were on air for about 30 or 40 minutes, and he's playing the ukulele, and of course the phone just went crazy. All these people want to talk to him. Mostly a lot of middle-aged women for some reason. But
that's odd, isn't it?
Anyway, and so that's going on, and I'm feeling guilty because I promised this publicist that I'd, promote the album, and he's not mentioning the album, and I'm looking at George Moore, and I'm pointing to the clock, and there's only about a minute left, and I'm saying we're supposed to be promoting this album, and so finally, I think it was George said, "Well, that's all lovely. We can't take any more calls, ladies and gentlemen. But Colin, I believe you've got a new album out of Rock and Roll Christmas," and Col just said, "Oh yeah, have I? Oh yeah, that's right. I've heard it. It's okay." And that was it. And I spent days waiting for the publicist to ring up and really rip into me because that's all they got. But that was just so typical of the man. He did not have an ego. He just loved people, and people loved him. The story of how they got the name, just very quickly, they were called, the KJ Quintet, and they were booked to do a big jazzorama thing out at Bankstown, and this is the person. You remember the horoscopes in the paper? Well, I think it was Fiona McMullen, and she was. I think she was talking to Kevin, and she said, "Look, the horoscope tells me, the joy is the big thing. So instead of being, Colin Jacobsen, it should be Col Joye, and you should call yourselves the Joy Boys." So Kevin thought that was a good idea, evidently, and he rang the promoter and he said, "Oh, we're not called, don't advertise KJ Quintet, we're the Joy Boys." And so he said, okay, and then he told Colin, and evidently, and I get this from a good authority, Michael, it was Colin said, "We can't do that. You can't go out to Bankstown and say, we're the Joy Boys, we'll get beaten up. So Kevin thought, yeah, I think he's right. So he rang the promoter and said, look, change it back to the KJ Quintet. And the promoter said, it's too late. I've already printed 10,000 posters. So they got stuck with the name.
But they didn't get bashed up, and it worked out.
Of course it worked out.
The horoscope was accurate.
And they were full of joy. And, the last time I had a chat to Colin, and he was expecting, the news wasn't good from about 3 years ago. I chatted to him about November last year, and he said, look, I'm hoping I'll be here for Christmas because the kids are coming home. So he made it, and he made it and a lot more, but it's a great loss. And
massive.
Yeah, and I think a lot of joy has gone out of the world when Colin passed.
Well, joy or not, they certainly left us with a lot of joy when you think about the music that was left behind, the acts they brought out.
Oh, look, and it was Bobby Rydell's manager. They were doing a big show at the stadium, and Bobby Rydell was there, and his manager said, I think to Kevin, what are you going to do when this is over? And Kevin said, what do you mean when it's over? And he said, well, this isn't going to last. You've got to think, why don't you set up a studio? Why don't you set up a promotion company? And they did.
The rest is history.
Wow, the rest is history.
What a history! I know it's personal for you, and watching you speak, it's still raw. But Jim, you've given a beautiful summation of a beautiful life. So thank you for that.
Well, I tried to express the fun,
Yeah.
of Colin's life, because he brought a lot of joy to a lot of people.
Sure did. The great Col Joye. It's 2:27.